G'day crew, welcome to Go Fantasy. Nice to have your company. It's the Lockout edition. Go Fantasy brought to you by checkmyrates.au. Visit the website, it's free to use. Take control of your financial future. Brandon and the team can help you get a better home loan rate. Well, we're here with all this work that has gone in through the preseason, all the preparation. Comes down to this, the lockout weekends. So I'm recording this, just got home from work. Home alone, except for the two dogs. I'm just turning up the volume on the telly so you can hear it. You might be able to hear Hawthorn up against Essendon. Decisions being made about this game in real time, but looks like I am locking in Jai Caldwell. I'm going to go through the team reveal shortly, but just wanted to touch base. This is part of our Saturday morning coffee run, which was one of my favourite podcasts to do last season. But just recording it on a Friday night, and we'll post it straight away, just to get our heads around everything that's going on and to introduce a couple of members of the GOAT Fantasy family coming on this season. So Luke and Darcy are going to help out with some extra insights throughout the season. So the warmest of GOAT Fantasy welcomes to those two lads who have already made some contributions this week. And I'm just going to bring that to the table, some Supercoach thoughts for a lot of the Victorian listeners who are so into Supercoach. Of course, we cater for fantasy and all different formats on GOAT Fantasy. So from a news perspective, there's not a hell of a lot to go through right now. I think at this stage we're just at the point where we just need to make our final decisions on players and our structures of our teams, on rookies, all that sort of thing. And you've consumed all the content. You know who the right players are to be picking, and you've narrowed down those final decisions that you have to make. So just going through my AFL fantasy team, just to give you guys an idea of the way that I'm going. So Connor Rozee, Jack Sinclair, I've gone for the two big dog defenders. Dan Houston, great role and hoping to make a bit of cash out of him. Caleb Windsor, who's been sort of the buzz, real budget priced defender with a nice role at Melbourne. Of course, we're not sure about what his ceiling is and how well he can accumulate, but we're willing to take that risk at that price. And then Blackiston and Lindsay at D5, D6. Sounds to me like there might be a couple of extra weeks given to Nick Bryan to get himself acclimated and fully fit for the AFL side. So that bodes well for Blackiston. In the midfield, so I've rolled the dice here on Jai Caldwell. Big decision, but wanted sorry, Dennis is barking. I wanted to have a premium midfielder without a bye, who was a little bit more unique, and that's where I've gone with Jai, and I think he gives a decent ceiling to the team. Of course, I'm recording this before the game gets underway, so hopefully that theory holds true. And then Goulden, Butters, Windhager is, again, a slightly more unique pick, but like his role, like his ceiling, I think his value at that price at $8.60. And then Walsh, Parrish, Bruin and Jagger Smith. English in the ruck with McAndrew at R2, Sheasel, Petrarca, Flanders. Buderick is pretty straightforward. And then it'll free up some extra cash for premiums. I've got Todd Marshall at F5 and Dev Robb at F6. And then Grill, Sarong, Sharp, Blamires, Zakostelski as R3, and then Cook, who I'm bullish on Cook getting a decent role for Adelaide, and hopefully he can make a bit of money a lot faster than, say, a Doveston, and then Lombard and Jakes at utility. So that's the lineup at the moment. The question mark's clearly about Caldwell, whether he's worth the money, and then Windhager avoiding that tagging role under Ross. Apart from that, I think it's all pretty self-explanatory. From a Supercoach perspective, of course, this is all subject to change, but similar with Rozee and Sinclair. I've actually gone another big dog defender in Zorko, who I'm hoping will be a keeper for the entirety of the season. Blackiston, Grill and Lindsay on field with Sarong and Jakes on the bench. Butters, Nick Dacos, Errol Goulden, Will Ashcroft, Hayden Young, Parrish, Bruin and Jagger Smith with Dersma, Sharp and Blamires on the bench. And then English and McAndrew with ZZ top. And then Sheasel, Petrarca, Flanders, Butterick, Filippo, and Todd Marshall at F6 with Robertson and Lombard on the bench. And then Jordan De Goey as the mid-pricer in the flex spot. So, full disclosure on the players that I'm picking, and I don't consider myself an AFL fantasy or Supercoach expert coach. I'm here to give news updates on fantasy-related players, but those are my teams. Hopefully they perform well enough to continue to give me at least a little bit of gravitas to run my own fantasy podcast. So I wanted to talk about a couple of things that Luke and Darcy have helped out with this week, just some theory, and just getting me to think about the game a bit differently, and hopefully I can pass on some insights to you guys as well. So a few key points ahead of the season proper. So in Supercoach, of course, the magical 3,300 points, and that's shared amongst every player on the ground, and that's how we end up with the scores in Supercoach. Of course, it's not quite as uniform as it is in AFL Fantasy. So, good point made by the boys is that, well, there's more players now because we've got the extra man on the bench instead of the sub. So there's 46 players sharing 3,300 points. In opening round, 8 of the top 15 players in terms of average score from 2025 played. So 8 of the top 15. 7 of those 8 didn't meet their 2025 average. Bontempelli, Grundy, Anderson, Smith, McCluggage, Dunkley all went below last season's average. The only player to outperform their average score from last season in opening round was Nick Dacos, who scored 117 with his 41 disposal effort. He beat his average last year by 1. So what's the takeout from all of that information? Well, every high price premium in Supercoach is probably going to drop in price. And that's just less points to go around amongst the players on the field. And I think it, as a general rule, the best players in Supercoach actually struggle to hold their starting price. That's just the way it goes. Perhaps they get back there later in the season. So worth noting, a Bontempelli, who's the most expensive player in the game, he's probably going to get cheaper. You can find a way to bring him in after his bye. Another talking point is the ruck dilemma. So the general consensus, the rule of thumb, is that ruck scoring will go down. This holds true for Supercoach and for AFL Fantasy as well. So are we willing to invest a huge amount of money at the top of the ruck line when we know we're going to be able to get these players cheaper? So the theory from the boys here is that, across opening rounds, a few rucks were able to score over 100, but it's going to be harder with the rules to get bigger scores. So Meek, Fort, Blitzarves all struggled for different reasons. Slower and more physical rucks perhaps doesn't quite suit them. New ruck rules, Briggs as well. So maybe this is not the year to spend up on too expensive rucks. A set and forget option is perhaps set and regret. So at the moment, I've got English in Supercoach and in Fantasy. It seems like he, amongst the top rucks, is the most likely to, hold their average, if not excel on what we saw from him last year. And he's reasonably priced in Supercoach. In Fantasy, you've got to pay up, but you're also getting a good captaincy option and a great matchup in round 1 against Briggs. So I think the lesson here is let's not overspend on rucks. Although you have to be brave because McAndrew, his job security is not guaranteed, but the idea of a starting ruck at a very low price in your R2 certainly does free up other options around the ground. So if you're brave enough to go with McAndrew and it pays off, you're going to get rewarded. There are other options out there, of course, and there's certain starting rucks who you can trust, but ultimately they're probably going to drop cash. Of course, because of opening round, again, we have to deal with early buys. So we're asking ourselves, do we favour a lesser player who doesn't have a buy, or do we just pick the best players available? So, Goulden, Nick Dacos, anyone from the Brisbane Lions, Bontempelli, there's heaps of players who fill this category because the best teams are playing in opening round. That's part of the justification for them playing, so that therefore some of the best players are featuring. So I think we can all agree here that balance is the best option when deciding whether to fade a superstar premium who has a bye versus picking a player just because they played right through the opening rounds of the season. I think it's more justified in AFL fantasy because you have more trades to go with a player who we will see week in, week out, and is going to continue to contribute points for you. In Supercoach, I still think it's important to value, and also the best players in the comp. And that is a challenge that we're all juggling with guys like Sam Walsh. Or do you pick an Essendon player because they play through? Do you pick a Fremantle midfielder, Brayshaw or Sarong? Like there's lots of different options. Great goal by Xavier Dersma. Just trying to sort out in your mind, you're going to have enough premiums playing every week. Noah Anderson's a great example in fantasy. Do you value this early Gold Coast run against Richmond and West Coast, or do you prefer to have someone who's going to be out there every week? Something for us all to consider. So the flex option in Supercoach. What's the best type of player to fill this role? Last year, there was a thought that having the extra ruck was the cheat code, but this year, of course, we feel very differently about ruck scoring. So according to Luke and Darcy, they believe the flex position is ideally suited to the mid-pricer who you have the least confidence in but still want to field with the added bonus if they gain dual position status later. So some suggestions for this role: Hayden Young, Darcy Parish, Tanner Bruin. They're in less than 50% of sides. They're good options for flex or riskier value selections. There are Caleb Windsor, Jordan De Goey, and Finn O'Sullivan. That showed last year with Bailey Smith and Caleb Daniel, Ryan Marrick, that you can, well, they must have players, the ones that do hit. I think Bruin is a lock for pretty much all of us. Caleb Windsor, perhaps more so in AFL Fantasy than Supercoach, has been favoured. Finn O'Sullivan has looked good in the midfield during the pre-season for North Melbourne. I've gone to Goey in that flex position. And I think with a full pre-season under his belt, he can be a really damaging scorer in Supercoach. The last eternal Supercoach dilemma: price v points. What's more important? You can't win without knowing your value picks. Players like Caleb Daniel, Bailey Smith, or Ryan Marrick, but you're not going anywhere without the top scorers. So finding that balance between value and also points on field, that's such a challenging part of Supercoach because you do have those limited trades. So much to consider ahead of Lockout. Just a few points. So thank you to Darcy and Luke for your contributions at the start of this season. Have a great first weekend of AFL Fantasy. Enjoy it. Good luck with all your selections. I hope it goes well. Keep clicking back to Goat Fantasy. We'll have more content for you throughout the entirety of the season, following all the storylines. Thank you for your support throughout the pre-season. I've tried to bring you as much as I can, get around to all the clubs, and hopefully I've provided some insight which has helped you to shape your teams as we go into the first Lockout. We'll catch you soon on Goat Fantasy.